I think David Lynch approached television without realizing it was television or without giving a moment's consideration to the fact that it was television. He unintentionally or unconsciously broke every rule of television and opened people's minds to what came afterwards. And I think the influences are very much still seen today. Miguel Ferrer in Reflections and Oral History of Twin Peaks. It's so beautiful just to leave it abstract. Once it becomes specific, it's no longer true to a lot of people, where if it's abstract, there could be some truth to it for everybody. David Lynch. And there it is. And this one features perhaps the greatest photo. David loves innocence. David loves evil versus naivete. And he understands the human condition. And he understands it like Rock and Picasso. He's like Seurat. David paints in strange globs and dots. If you get way back, hey, it's a movie. But you got to get way back. You got to get an overview of it, because if you're in the middle of it, all you'll see is globs of paint, unconnected. You won't see the brilliant patterns that are in his soul. Mel Brooks. I love this idea that we're sort of twisted beings going about in the darkness, doing strange things, bumping around in confusion. To me, there's got to be some light somewhere in the darkness, but it's a very absurd, strange world until you find it. David Lynch. David Lynch is a master at creating art that makes artists want to create their own art. From the preface to the 2020 book, A Skeleton Key to Twin Peaks. Everything I learned in my life, I learned because I decided to try something new. David Lynch. Lynch's imagined spaces make sense amidst the narrative chaos and the competing alternate realities because they serve as spaces of consistency, however strange and dreamlike, that acknowledge and amplify the inner states and forbidden desires of the characters. We long for our visits to these strange spaces because they are spaces of infinite possibility. They promise what postmodernism holds dearest: never-ending font of interpretations and meanings that could help us parse, handle, and survive the more prosaic everyday world. Doug Cunningham, David Lynch, Master of Expressionist Surrealism, Part 3. The enormous canvas of the return makes for a more porous universe, one with more flexible cosmic laws, which means the central Lynchian questions, where one character or reality begins and another ends, are harder than ever to answer. Dennis Lim, Memento Mori. As we will see, Cooper's subconscious mind is seeking answers through the dream, while, at the same time, otherworldly beings access Cooper's dream and try to help him. John Thorne dreams of Deer Meadow. Picking up as McLaughlin's Agent Cooper is completing his 25-year purgatory in the Black Lodge, this long-delayed third season contrives, through murky doppelganger metaphysics, involving the very Lynchian combo of electricity and vomit, to trap the beloved Cooper for a dozen episodes within the serenely concussed form of insurance agent Dougie Jones, while yet another clone, the glowering evil Coop, unleashed at the end of season 2, roams the criminal Badlands. Dennis Lin, Memento Mori. Roams the criminal Badlands. Dennis Lim, Memento Mori. I call them the Z forces because the letter Z always seems to be associated with these curious figures who seem to intersect with Cooper's journey at critical junctures, arguably to protect him. From the In Our House Now podcast. Turn on the light and the darkness automatically goes away. A nice reminder from David Lynch. An idea comes and you want to make it the way the idea says it wants to be. You just stay true to that. Clues are beautiful because I believe that we're all detectives. We mull things over and we figure things out. David Lynch. Success is a beguiling devil, and you're not smart enough to know what that means. And then some part of you sees the guns getting loaded and the rope getting prepared. I think David Lynch or Mel Brooks, maybe Mark Frost. I lost track of this one. Is the whole of Twin Peaks just a collection of characters to store the trauma? Are we seeing fractured parts of the real story through someone's eyes, the dreamer's eyes? She, Laura, is the dreamer, and her dream is telling her that Bob is just an obfuscation and symbol of her father's abuse of her, and that Maddie is a disassociative way of placing that storyline in something other than herself. This is from episode 20 of the Blue Rose Task Force podcast. This quote is from Elle. There may even be a good and evil side at play here, and we, our human race, are the game. The Secret History of Twin Peaks, Mark Frost. This one's better with Robert Nepper reading, but I believe all these phenomena that our puffed up egos and busy ant minds persist in trying to label, categorize, penetrate, and comprehend all spring from this same uncanny source. This is the mother of all others. And were we ever able to set our eyes on its ultimate nature, we would find it as foreign, incomprehensible, and indifferent to us as ours would be to the bacterial microbes swimming in a drop of water. Mark Frost, The Secret History of Twin Peaks. The key itself is a manifestation of a memory. The key to the Great Northern has Cooper's phrase on the back, which it would, of course, not be there, so it's like a physical memory. A memory became an actual artifact from the In Our House Now podcast. Things that were hidden or not talked about started coming to light. I feel like there's still something going on that regular people don't know about. Yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist. They call you a conspiracy theorist as a bad thing, but people have intuition and they feel things and they feel something's going on in this particular kind of world that isn't right. David Lynch from the Under the Skin podcast, episode 80. The Red Room is a place that reflects the consciousness of the person who enters. It is a place of transformation. It is also a place where the buried or concealed aspects of a person's subconscious are made manifest. Those who are vulnerable or unprepared for what they encounter in the Red Room can be psychologically wounded as a result of their visit. John Thorne, The Realization of Laura Palmer from the Essential Wrapped in Plastic Pathways to Twin Peaks. This is a really poor quality visual. Sorry for that. Twin Peaks worked in an abstract, unconventional manner. It was challenging, subversive, and unpredictable. Frost deliberately and Lynch intuitively designed Twin Peaks to be a subjective experience for viewers, one that would allow them to develop their own interpretation of the text, to supply their own meaning to what they heard and saw. John Thorne, Essential Wrapped in Plastic. Finally, regarding the figure 8 itself, we know Cooper is a great admirer of the Dalai Lama, so of course, when trying to guide his unconscious mind to a literal awakening into his enlightenment, his reasoning brain would direct his dream along the eightfold path of Buddhism. T. Kyle King from We Live Inside a Dream, Understanding the Finale of Twin Peaks: The Return. This is true for us. We create our world and then enter into that world. We live in the world that we have created. When our hearts are pure, then we create the beautiful, enlightened life we have wished for. This is cited by Matt Colt in the article Eternal Stories from the Upanishads in The Return. Using color-coded note cards to keep track of who and what were featured in each unit, Lynch and Dunham divided this massive footage into pieces, trying to keep a good balance while keeping a consistent pace and sense of punctuation. From the Lost in Twin Peaks podcast, welcome to season 3, parts 1 and 2. Film is both sound and picture working together through time. David Lynch. Richard, to me, is what happens when you integrate the good part of Cooper, that no longer has his desire for home and love, that he gave to the Cooper that went with Janie E., and what you also have without the appetites. That's what Mr. C gave the Dougie Tulpa. When you integrate the rest, the good parts of Cooper and the bad parts of Cooper that no longer have a desire for love or have an appetite for pleasure, that's what you have with Richard. What you have left is somebody that's a little bit closer to reality because the good part of Cooper and the bad part of Cooper have both spun off aspects of themselves and removed them from their own identities. Part of what we know as viewers of the original series as being an integral part of why we love Cooper, and what is left is sort of a real version of Cooper, a grizzled FBI agent who is following a quest and is trying to go forward. From the Counter Esperanto podcast, Tangents About Twin Peaks, The Return, Part 2. In The Return, we have the Southwest meets the Northwest, in that we're getting these different sides of the same sort of mythology. Counter Esperanto podcast. Returning to the story of Twin Peaks, David Lynch essentially got to go back and undo what he considered the series' greatest misstep, and turned Laura back into an enigma and left her that way. Like Dale Cooper, we are all oftentimes a mix of the light, the dark, and the clueless in varying proportions. Matt Murray, Cornpone Flicks. I tried to capture some of his fantastic editing from that video, and it's a great series he has. Perhaps the Jeffries character is helping the audience understand the state of Dale Cooper at the end of The Return. Maybe Jeffries was the Cooper of a different story, a pawn in some larger game, or a failed protagonist whose quests has left him in a state of broken and forgetful energy. Jeremiah Beaver, Take the Ring, Episode 2, Philip Jeffries. Even through his catatonic state, Cooper works to systematically right all the wrongs committed by his Tulpa counterpart. Brian Allen, I Need You to Make Another One, An Unlikely Origin of Douglas Jones. If you have a golf ball-sized consciousness, when you read a book, you'll have a golf ball-sized understanding. When you look out a window, a golf ball-sized awareness. When you wake up in the morning, a golf ball-sized wakefulness. And as you go about your day, a golf ball-sized inner happiness. David Lynch, I think from Catching the Big Fish. The messengers of darkness from beyond who, like Bob, are behind Laura's death and the interpretation of the positive and negative energy of the Red Room, which affect Cooper as he searches for answers, derive from that aspect of Lynch's private worldview and give us a story that puts an auteur spin on his modernism. Martha Nachemson, Television Rewired, The Rise of the Auteur Series. Established by Dale Cooper's visions in the original series, continuing with Fire Walk with Me as Laura Palmer's nightmare, and The Return being underpinned with the meta question, who is the dreamer? Twin Peaks invites the viewer to dive into the collective unconscious or the shared dream. Jeremiah Beaver, Take the Ring, Talk About Judy, Dreamers. All of what we're seeing, of course, is being filtered through the mind of Dale Cooper, who is still trapped in the Red Room. John Thorne, Ominous Whoosh, A Wandering Mind Returns to Twin Peaks. Electricity crackles and the mother's pain, her Garmonbosia, courses through the nearby power lines, surging away to feed whatever foul entity would consume such trauma. John Thorne, Ominous Whoosh. Does Bob have this information from Cooper due to Cooper being a future host of Bob? Does he have access to Cooper's memories here in a lodge space, timey-wimey way, just like how Annie shows up in Laura's bed in a dreamy kind of state in Fire Walk with Me? This is from Blue Rose Task Force podcast, Season 2, Episode 9, Arbitrary Law. And this is Agent Bernardi. Great episode. We think we understand the rules when we become adults, but what we experience is really a narrowing of the imagination. David Lynch. As the world darkens and we are submerged in the dream, the scene becomes reminiscent of the scene in Fire Walk with Me, where Cooper's dream scene is from, where Cooper waits for Jeffries to appear, like his dream had showed him, and cries out, "Gordon," just as he does in the darkening Twin Peaks Sheriff Department. This is from Twin Peaks The Return Analysis. I have lost track of the writer's name. It is from a website called quietus.net. Cooper knows that Hutch and Chantal pose an existential threat to his physical well-being, and until their threat is eliminated, he does not dare to let his mind wander into the story he wants to tell. John Thorne, Ominous Whoosh, A Wandering Mind returns to Twin Peaks. Imagine if one paints a picture or takes a photo and then has a 2,000-piece jigsaw puzzle made from it, assembles the puzzle, and then removes just enough pieces so that someone could see that a whole picture is there, but you can't quite make out the whole context of what is depicted. There are gaps that indicate the whole. At the same time, they're preventing the apprehension of the whole. This is from Counter Esperanto Podcast, Tangents About Twin Peaks, Return Part 5. And the rest of the quote, which I do not have diagrammed, says, "In those spaces that are between all those things, there is," one of Lynch's favorite phrases, "room to dream." And that's where we put ourselves into the text in a lot of ways. That's also the way that Lynch thinks about the ideas that he gets when he's daydreaming, not just meditating, but daydreaming. He feels like his ideas aren't something that he's actually making, that they're being flipped from another room, piece by piece, and that he has each piece so that he has to sort of make it work. And so you end up with an incomplete jigsaw puzzle. And I really like the visual that goes along with this diagram, I must say. When you talk about things, unless you're a poet, a big thing becomes smaller. David Lynch from Lynch on Lynch. Cole knows that no single mind can impose itself. No individual consciousness can be the dreamer. Two Coopers is bad enough, but Gordon Cole knows tragedy looms if Dale believes his view of reality supersedes everyone else's. Ominous Whoosh. He could go down as one of the greatest presidents in history because he has disrupted things so much. No one is able to counter this guy in an intelligent way. Sometime later, unfortunately, if you continue as you have been, you will not have a chance to go down in history as a great president. This would be very sad, it seems, for you and for our country. You are causing suffering and division. It's not too late to turn the ship around, point our ship toward a bright future for all. You can unite the country. Your soul will sing. Under great, loving leadership, no one loses. Everybody wins. It's something I hope you think about and take to heart. All you need to do is treat all the people as you would like to be treated. David Lynch, 2018. What he seeks is not only to, in his mind, save Laura Palmer from her trauma, but to prevent his own in turn. Timothy Glariton, from Agent Cooper and Me on the Endless Road to Recovery. Cooper knows that Hutch and Chantal pose an existential threat to his well-being, and until their threat is eliminated, He does not dare let his mind wander into the story he wants to tell. Ominous whoosh. Lynch has employed this storytelling tactic before. The story of Inland Empire is conveyed through the psychological musings of an absent character, Laura Dern's monologue woman, who tries to make sense of her tormented life by spinning a tale that's one part wish fulfillment, one part truth, and one part folktale. John Thorne, ominous whoosh. A single entity, in this case, a cup of coffee, undergoes radical change. It is still coffee the entire time, as the old waiter is saying over and over, coffee, coffee, coffee. Yet it takes dramatically different forms. Craig Miller and John Thorne mapping the Red Room, wrapped in plastic, issue 63. At the beginning of the series, Frost's knowledge of the classics and of the literature of mysticism worked brilliantly with Lynch's instincts for the reality attainable when human intelligence moves beyond language and cultural form. Martha Nachemson, The Passion of David Lynch, Wild at Heart in Hollywood. I was one of those fans who reveled in the show's contradictions, in its raw imaginative power, in its everlasting openness to interpretation, its enduring ability to stimulate. I couldn't contain myself. From Dwelling on the Threshold, Twin Peaks, and Our Relationship with Art. John Thorne Lecture at Dallas Museum of Art. It feels more like entering a world than it feels like entering a story. David Lynch.